Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Hi everyone, welcome to today's exciting episode. We are actually talking about BEMER today, which is Bio-Electro-Magnetic-Energy-Regulation. And it's a product that I've been investigating for a long time, and I finally got one not that long ago to utilize on my horses. It's a rug that can come with leg boots and potentially a neck part to it as well. So it's a low frequency pulsed electromagnetic frequency, and a low frequency form of pulsed electromagnetic frequency, which is PEMF, which people might have heard of, but we're going to explain the differences with that. But today, to talk about it, we have Dr. Jane Clothier, who's an equine therapist and a PhD. She's completed a PhD. So how are you today, Soph? I'm going to hand over to you to introduce Jane.
Very well, and I wanted to say to people that I am so excited about this because I've really admired Jane from a distance because we hadn't met previous to this. Reading, your articles, you put together really a few pieces of information that I found just absolutely fascinating when I was a uni student, blogs that you'd made public, so I'm very grateful for that as well. So Dr. Jane Clothier migrated to Australia in 2007, where she began working as an equine musculoskeletal therapist on the north coast of New South Wales, while presenting workshops with various bodywork educators. She later commenced a research degree at the University of New England, gaining a studentship in the Animal Behaviour and Welfare Group at CSIRO, which is a big deal because that's Australia's national science agency in 2014. Jane was awarded her PhD for her thesis managing the miracle foal, an investigation into the persistent effects of prematurity and dysmaturity in horses, a mouthful, in 2019, and there is a publication for horse owners coming soon, which is exciting. Jane went on to gain a graduate diploma in veterinary acupuncture with CIVT and then acquired her first BEMER therapy blanket January 2023 and has been using it in her practice ever since then. And as a BEMER partner, also makes the devices available to horse owners, professionals in Australia, which is really cool. And today's going to be a great discussion about the technology. So how are you, Jane?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, it's 2 years since I acquired my BEMER, having resisted for quite a while. After friends in the UK were telling me about it, and I was just like, oh yeah, it's another of those things, because I'm sort of naturally skeptical. But then when I learned a little bit more and saw the effect that it was having on horses, I became fascinated. And I had the opportunity to get one when a partner from Scandinavia literally brought one to my door here in New South Wales. And it was just an offer I couldn't refuse at that point. And I'm so glad I did, because I've been using it for 2 years now with client horses as well as my own. And it's just been an amazing journey. It's like discovering bodywork for the first time again. It's that level of excitement. So
Yeah, I would say the same. Already, I haven't got to use it on many clients' horses at the moment because I haven't been working that much, but horses that I have used it on for different things, like I had one that had chronic laminitis and I just put the leg boots on for 5 minutes and the next day could see a difference. I said to the person who owns the horse, who's a trainer, I was like, we'll just see what happens, we'll just do 5 minutes. And she said, well, he's pretty good at the moment. Anyway, the next day there was an obvious change in his neck muscles. Like he was just softer, he just seemed happier, and his feet weren't that sore. They definitely weren't as sore as they'd been, but like at that time that we put the boots on. And then I had another horse that was at a clinic that hurt itself on, I don't know what it did, whether it caught itself on a gate, but it had a massive hematoma on the rump. And I thought, well, we'll just see what happens. Like, I didn't have any energy to treat the horse. And so I was like, well, we'll put the rug on it and put some tape on it. You're like, that's about all I've got. So it significantly reduced the hematoma over about, I only did it while I was there. So I think I did it 2 days in a row and then a day later. And it was really interesting to see it shrink over that time. So that was really interesting for me. And then Jelly has myofibrillary myopathy, and I've used other PEMF devices on him, and I actually found that it wasn't so good for his muscles. And I'd use it, I found the lowest that I could possibly use was at least a bit better, but I didn't feel like I noticed a big difference for him. I actually felt like his muscles struggled. Whereas since using the BEMER on him, is definitely a difference in his like muscle tone. Like it really helps him, which I find interesting because his muscles don't work the same as other horses, like normal horses. So that's, and on myself, I've noticed the differences in my back. But yeah, like we'd love to hear more about it because that's my very limited experience at the moment. So would you like to kind of go into some of the like technical aspects and studies
And
about it?
try.
Yeah.
This is a quite complicated thing to talk about,
Mm.
but I shall give it a go. So, I mean, as possibly people know, I don't know, but pulsed electromagnetic frequency is. I actually looked up the definition on the University of Queensland site to just sort of see what the formal side say about this. And there's a lot of phrases like "it is thought that," which usually sort of infers that there's limited evidence, and so that the sort of the medical field might not be as accepting as we are at this point. But that refers to the alternating or pulsed electromagnetic fields, which induce electrical current within the tissue. So you're talking about your horse, you sort of think, well, yeah, that's a risky area. We've already
Yeah.
got electrical disturbances going on. And then it says that even though these currents are extremely small, their main therapeutic purpose is thought to enhance bone and tissue healing. So to me, that's a really limited interpretation of what happens, but that's when we're coming back to the scientific evidence and what has been demonstrated through medical research publications in that case. As a general description, we're looking at the use of low frequency electromagnetic fields to stimulate cellular repair and regeneration. And I'll talk about how that works with BEMER in a minute. But again, it's inducing tiny electrical currents that restore the natural function of cells and boost the metabolism as a result. So the sort of immediate effects of pain and inflammation are reduced and circulation is improved. And that includes the movement of lymph fluid and metabolic waste from the cells as well as blood actually moving more. So with BEMER, the actual signal, so it's the flux density, the magnetic strength, and also the electrical frequency, so the degree to which it's pushed into the tissue, is very low, and it's much lower than with other PEMF devices. And that's a point of some contention with some people. But it has been found since 1998, when this technology was first developed, this product was first developed for the horse. We're in a third generation now, that this has the biggest and strongest and most significant effect on microcirculation. So that's vasodilation, but specifically vasomotion, lots of words there, which is the rhythmic dilation or opening and contraction of the arterioles, which are the blood vessels below arteries. So we've got the pulse working away at, what is it, in the horse, 30 to 40 beats per minute when resting. So it's sending the blood around that huge body, and through what we could call the highways, if you like, of circulation. This is going down into the local roads, and below that, the capillary bed. So, it'd be very Australian to say that's your dirt roads and your real neighbourhood roads. So what happens is that signal stimulates that pulsing and contraction in the arterioles. Now, there's a little area called the precapillary sphincter, which is a rather unpleasant sort of sounding term, that enables the flow from the arterioles into the capillaries. And these open and close about 4 to 10 cycles per minute, but it's different ones all the time. So what can happen when there's any form of restriction? The opening and closing of these changes. And so you get limitations in the blood flow into the capillaries. The arterioles are innervated. So that is where the signal is reaching, and then that stimulates that opening and closing. So normal function, the opening and closing, is developed or stimulated by the levels of oxygen in the blood in surrounding tissue. So let me just get this correct. So if those oxygen levels are low, vasomotion in the arterioles increases, we get more opening into the capillaries and opening for longer. So then blood flow increases. So I don't have access to company research, but that is my sort of interpretation based on human medical research of what is happening there. So when you increase vasomotion, you're increasing that oxygen supply. The exact pathways, we don't know. That's sort of all up for interpretation. It's one of those areas where there isn't a huge amount known and understood, particularly in horses. But clearly it's relating to possibly to calcium ions in the blood. We know that calcium and calcium deficiency causes high blood pressure through vasoconstriction. So, we've got a lot of relationships there that we can draw conclusions from. So that is a quick immersion. What can inhibit vasomotion? It's all the usual suspects. So injury, inflammation, infection, stress causes different substances to release into the bloodstream. So it can have different effects, like hormonal effects. Cold, obviously, that's easy for us to understand. Poor vascular tone, just, low fitness, lack of movement.
Age.
Certainly muscular constriction. It can have a direct effect. Metabolic issues, medication, toxicity, it just goes on. So one of my things is you talk about benefiting circulation. People do tend to think in a sort of popular understanding, muscle function improves. Well, it does, but it's not just that. It's going down into blood supply to organs, blood supply, nerves need blood supply, cartilage needs blood supply, and it's all at that microcirculation level.
Yeah, I think that's really like when you talk about muscle tone as well, like that, I was just thinking about Jelly because, he can have very unusual muscle tone. Like sometimes they're really tight and sometimes they're really floppy, depending on what his kind of state is. And so, probably on that microcirculation level, he's had a lot of effects over time, because of his muscles not working normally, and like muscle contraction's important for vasomotion as well. So, I just keep going back to him because he's an unusual case and kind of thinking about him on a cellular level and trying to always figure out, well, like, why does he respond better to this and not to, not to other therapies or whatever. So it's like if he has too much massage, which because he's been in a couple of clinics with me where he's got a lot of massage, his muscles go like they don't know what to do anymore.
Oh, yeah.
It's really interesting how this therapy, seems to really help him. And I think it's that, on a microcirculation level, he's probably struggled for a really long time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've got somebody who's just acquired a BEMER who has got several horses, but one of them is retired due to PSSM, polysaccharide S something, myelopathy. Is that right?
Polysaccharide storage myopathy. Yeah, it's different.
But yeah, that would escape me. So we're going to be very interested to see what happens to him. And I've read reports of the stronger devices causing issues with those horses, as with Jelly.
Yeah, and I've talked to another racehorse trainer who had a different device, and they'd found the same with their thoroughbreds that tied up, that they didn't respond that well to the devices that they had. So I think it makes sense how this device, could And I also just think the lower frequency stuff is so much more beneficial to our systems. Like we're often just overstimulating the system in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, and this comes back again to one of my hobby horses, as I mentioned to you earlier, about we don't always need to go big to get an
Yeah.
effect, to get a significant effect. And I know from, when I used my horse BEMER on myself, as we all do when we haven't got access to a human one, very off-label, shouldn't mention it, but we do. And then get a human one as well. It's when everything's fine, you don't necessarily feel anything.
No.
And that's
Yeah.
a problem in persuading people that this actually works. Is when people have a problem, I had somebody who's got a serious chronic back problem, following venting falls, who moved house recently and is absolutely wrecked, exhausted and wrecked. And she lay on the BEMER, the human BEMER this was, and said, oh, it's found it. I thought, well, it's not found it. That's your body responding where there's damage, which is so fascinating. And it comes back to the whole concept of like the inner doctor, which we hear about in some therapies and certainly not mainstream medicine, but where the body knows what to do. And we just have to give it that bit of help, but getting back onto that frequency and finding it again, almost.
Yeah, and not overstimulating it
Mm.
so that it, it's like goes into a bit of a crisis. So,
Yeah, and I think sometimes the overstimulation that we use both in body work and any other sort of therapeutic work is to reassure ourselves that something's happening to that body that can't talk to us. And
yeah.
what happens, and one of the reasons BEMER works so well and is purchased as well by people who see it working on their own horse is that the horse shows you. And we don't have a placebo effect there.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
have an effect when they recognize the BEMER and start responding straight away before you switch it on, but that's the body doing its thing. That's no bad thing. But that's is the direct result of the of using BEMER.
yeah.
In
Yeah. So do you want
osteopathy,
to, oh, sorry.
oh, I was just going to say, in osteopathy, that's one of their major tenets is the rule of the artery. So the idea that the delivery of blood around the body is it's primary, like it's one of your most, it's the most important um,
Yeah,
delivery of health to parts of the body. Where is your circulation? Where is the motion as well? That the motion of blood delivery through like respiration, but all kinds of motion throughout the body. And we talked about the increased microcirculation, but it's and I that seems to be something that a lot of therapies say this increases circulation, it increases circulation. Like you hear that for just about every therapy that there is.
mm,
And lots of people like to use, thermal cameras before and after therapies, etc., for whatever they've done to demonstrate whether it's massage or, some other form of therapy. But this in particular, that microcirculation, the way that it gets right down into the capillaries, like that's such an important point talking about that precapillary sphincter, that you're getting an increase into that space and that it's modulated by the oxygen levels in the tissue. So the ability to further deliver more oxygen, you can have cellular nutrient supply, there's more metabolic waste removal, so you've got better efficiency within your cells, and the intracellular mechanisms. We're just reading some things about what actually happens inside the cell. You have all these positive effects with immune modulation when you have that better transfer of like nutrient supply, metabolic waste removal. So super interesting. Is there any other benefits that you see from that increase in circulation to that space?
oh my goodness. I've got loads of cases now where really interesting things have happened. But I mean, just last week, there's a thoroughbred horse that I see quite regularly he's the most dysfunctional functional horse that I know, in that he's got a complete S-bend of a spine and all kinds of things going on in his neck. I recently did get the neck piece for the BEMER as well. So
Yeah, I want that already.
yeah, you want it. I thought you would.
Yeah.
I'm going to say you should get it.
I've like connected the 2 feet ones around the neck. I've had the rug over the horse's head. I'm like, this horse needs it on its neck.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah. So he's used to the blanket and the the leg cuffs. This was the first time I've used the neck applicator, as it's called as well. It's a bit like neck piece. And this time he did respond with yawning, but he was really sort of holding back and thinking about what was happening. So there was obviously something slightly different going on. And afterwards, he's one of those very sort of thin-skinned thoroughbreds where all the veins stand up very obviously at the best of times. He's also got one of those weird veins in his face where the function has failed. The valve isn't working, I don't know, but he puts his head down and it fills up.
Yeah.
And it is quite huge. But this time after the session, he waited, and after the session, he put his head down, and his head, every vein in his head stood out. I've got photos which I can't share because people will think there's something terrible happening. But it was the effect. He'd obviously got restriction in his neck from his spinal issues in his neck, cervical spine. And, the report from the first ride afterwards that he was much freer left and right through the shoulders, which has, been an issue with him. He's like I say, he's got full spine problems. And so I'm just fascinated to see where that goes, because I've never seen anything like it. I mean, lots of horses, you see the veins and arteries in the upper legs vasodilate very significantly, and it's got to be related to muscle tension. And one of my friends in England called it the Dynarod effect, which is kind of, if you know Dynarod, there you had famous adverts where you've got a blockage in your pipe somewhere, and they come and they push this big rod through, and the blockage clears and everything moves. So that's kind of a bit glib, if you like, but there's definitely something clears as the either the spinal restriction has been resolved, but the circulatory restriction remains at a deeper level, possibly to those muscles that we just cannot, despite our best intentions, always reach, or there is a continuing sort of restriction from the spinal issue. I don't know. And lots of the time we don't know. And does that matter? It's all helping. If I come back to myself, I did get the human one. I couldn't resist when I was in Europe and brought it back. Excuse me. And after 6 weeks, my scoliosis dramatically improved.
Wow.
And I first discovered that I was walking down a hill at lunchtime. I'm not doing anything to do with my back at all. And I said that my movement feels different. So I noticed it from the inside. And then sort of later on, I was thinking about this and was checking my back out with my own hands and thinking it's a bit different because I'm used to what it feels like. And my muscle development's very different on either side of the spine. And then I did what we always do, which is get the hand mirror and try and look at your back in the mirror to see if it's straight. And I thought, that is quite a bit straighter. I'm not imagining this. And I discovered what it feels like. For me, it was suddenly being able to stand solidly and weight into both feet. And I thought, this is what horses feel like when they come back to square after not having been able to do it. And I can't even describe that sensation, but it was very much a deep, deep awareness of something feeling right and feeling good. It's probably the best I can get to with that. And so there's this, it's very interesting, like you're saying, Raquel, that you've used it on yourself and had your own experiences. And then that opens out onto your awareness or what's happening in the horse's body, or at least what they're feeling. It's one of the fascinating things.
Weird experience that I had, because I've had an artery problem in my neck, and I probably put it on a bit too soon. And I wish I could ask somebody about this, but it was weird because my artery obviously wasn't healed at the time, and I put it on, and my whole neck went flaccid. So my neck muscles. And I just assumed that my arteries couldn't cope with the change in circulation at that time. So I stopped using it for a while because I figured I was too acute, and because I know I had an artery damage, like very specifically, that I was like, maybe this is not a good thing. Like now it still changes the tone in my muscles, but it's not the same as what it was doing then. So I think my body was just not able to heal at that time because it was already so in such a compromised state. So that was really interesting, and whether it was probably still helping, but I was just like, I don't know. There's no
Yeah,
evidence to support it being used in this situation. So I kind of backed off a bit, but my lower back, yeah, definitely has.
yeah. With your neck, maybe too much circulation at that
Yeah,
point,
I think it just wasn't ready to,
and a confused
it,
body
it couldn't
trying to
work
heal.
well enough. Yeah,
Mm.
it was just in such a, well, I don't even think it was in a healing state yet. Like it was just struggling to just deal with what was going on, if that makes sense. So it
Yeah.
would be like treating a really sick horse,
Mm.
you'd be very mindful about how you treat that horse because their system's already overstimulated just with being really sick. So, yeah. But do you want to
Yeah.
talk about, just before we go into some more cases, because I think that's the really interesting stuff, but do you just want to talk about like some of the studies because this is a product that has had a number of studies in
Mm.
horses. And like there was one study we were looking at before where like they had 100 horses in the study, and that's like amazing for horse studies because many horse studies have like
Yeah.
8. Um, so
That was
yeah,
the surgery one. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
the recovery from surgery one. Do
Mm.
you want to just talk about some of those studies because it does kind of separate it from some other devices?
Yes, yeah. And again, I say there's been lots of studies in humans, and it's worth
Yeah.
looking at those as well. And there's one thing I must say about, the whole sort of equine science field. Sometimes there's a failure to look at the human side. And this is something I found in my own PhD. And I thought,
Yeah.
why aren't people looking at this? And there was so much information there. And of course, it doesn't all automatically translate, but there's a lot of physiology does.
Yeah.
So it would, anyway. But yeah, that study you mentioned, right, I'll start with that one. I came across that before it was published, and I think it was published in 2024. So it's only sort of hit the press, as it were, quite recently. But yeah, it was during general anesthesia, and usually for ocular surgery, so enucleation and eye surgery, I think. And half the horses were administered 15 minutes of BEMER. I think it was, let's see, I haven't got the actual timings, but they measured arterial pressure, blood gas, blood lactate, and CK, creatine kinase, sort of between horses under general anesthesia. And the recovery was scored. And the horses that had the BEMER, this is where it gets interesting, they actually had a worse recovery score from general anesthesia, which basically means they just took longer to come round and stand up again and be raised. And so initially that might sound bad, but actually it makes total sense when you think that, well, we've got better perfusion through the blood. The anesthetic is more comprehensively taken in throughout the body. That's not a very technical way of putting it, but sort of we recognize that for things like antibiotics, BEMER actually helps because it's going to circulate the antibiotic more thoroughly. So it was concluded in that one that microcirculation, when it's improved, leads to a more effective general anesthesia. And the next step on from that, obviously not researched at this point, would be that less anesthetic can be used, which would have to be beneficial if somebody gets around to researching that and looking at that. It's certainly good, that's good implication, say, for equine dentistry. Um, and so we already know that a lot of farriers and equine dentists are using BEMER on horses for calm a horse during treatment when they're not necessarily anaesthetized. So there's this kind of sedating effect anyway. But that's
With
the
that study,
tangential.
sorry.
Sorry.
With that study, did they look at how horses got up post sedation?
They may have done, I don't have that to hand at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know that they did, but that would be an
Mm.
interesting thing to look
Yeah.
at, because we know horses notoriously can have quite bad anesthetic recoveries and create a
Yeah.
lot of injuries. But I'd be, yeah, really interested to know if there was a difference in, like, because if they kind of, their
Mm.
recovery scores were longer, I would assume they got up better because that's what I've seen as a vet. Like if you can keep a horse down for longer post anesthetic, they usually get up better.
Yeah.
And so it would be really interesting to kind of see how they get up and then what they're like immediately after anesthesia because they can look pretty
Mm.
drugged out and pretty wobbly, but I just wonder if those horses kind of were they as wobbly, or did they,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
return to normal? Because, yeah, I've seen, like, even with my horses that were heat stressed the other day, it's helped their recovery from the heat stress. So it's kind
Right,
of,
really? Yeah.
yeah. So it's just kind of that similar, you know,
Mm.
I guess, stress mechanism, and watching how they recover. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've just gone into the very preliminary stuff, that report that I had, and I admit I've not read that paper in depth yet. So if, I shall certainly look for that. Um, so another one that was done was on 16 thoroughbred horses, and that was looking at, again, just using the leg cuffs, but looking at lower limb circulation. And it was thermographic imaging for surface temperature, and actually measurements of the lateral palmar digital veins and arteries on ultrasound. So this was described as a preliminary study, and it found that changes in body temperature as measured were not significant after BEMER, and also that the BEMER group showed a significant increase in digital artery and vein diameter, while the sham group showed a significant increase in digital artery diameter only. So that suggests there's something going on with those sphincters. But what did happen was that after treatment, the sham group, their temperatures dropped again more significantly, whereas the BEMER group remained at the same level. So there's something interesting happening. But what happens with a lot of these studies, they've got a hypothesis, and it's not aimed at that interesting something, it's aimed at something else. And then the interesting something shows up in the data afterwards. So this is where sort of, scientific studies need to build and build and build. And one thing, and I'll sort of, as a general thing for me, sort of coming from like complementary therapies first and then going into science, I was very aware of the huge variation in horses and what that comes down to. You can have a group of horses of the same breed. Their experiences as well as their bodies are so totally different, the individual variation. Now, we manage them differently in different homes, we feed them differently, we deal with issues differently, we ride them, train them differently. It's every single aspect of their life varies. And I was sort of said when I was at CSIRO, I had students either side of me whose their study cohort would be a flock of sheep out in the paddock, and they were all born in the same month.
Yeah,
They had about 3 different
much easier to
dads,
get
a lot
yeah,
of different mums, but 3 different
example.
dads. And their experience had been pretty identical through the whole of that first year. And they had large numbers of them. But we have this enormous variation and invariably smaller numbers. So, that the surgical one, it was 100, but that was gathered over a year. Again, we don't know all the variations in the horse's background, but we have a situation that's quite intensive and invasive there in terms of the eye surgery. So there's something to measure. But with most of the other equine studies, it's less than 20 horses.
Fair.
And a lot of them, say in universities, they've got the resident herd, as you've experienced before as well. And those sort of become the study cohort in many instances. So there's a lot of problems in that variation. Science needs numbers, and it also looks at controls and a lot of standardization in the cases that are being looked at. And it's hard to establish that. And what tends to happen, and for instance with this, is it goes to racehorses, because that's where you have a lot of horses of the same breed and frequently similar ages and similar experiences. They also have a huge number of problems.
Yeah.
And that gets in the way. So, for me, doing lower limb circulation, that's not where I see the big changes. You see the changes, like I say, in the upper legs frequently, where the big muscle groups are in the quarters, and where you can see visible vasodilation, where there's muscles that are being affected by exercise. Whereas the lower legs, you do have limitations. Often come, say, in racehorses, you would have that a lot of issues with shoeing and hoof balance affecting that
Which
lower limb
affects circulation.
circulation.
Yeah.
So, it's the lens you're looking through.
Yes.
Different. And it makes research very complicated because we're looking at something that's working holistically on the whole horse, rather than focally and locally. on a specific problem. We can see a benefit to a local focal problem, but there's all of those other factors coming in as well.
Yeah,
It's a bit
definitely.
hard, which is not to create excuses, but it just says we're not quite there yet. The study that got closer and did show significant improvements was Mary King's, and to just sort of reiterate, she's a diplomat of the American College of Veterinary Sports Medicine and Rehabilitation, and also an associate professor in equine sports medicine and rehabilitation. So I'm sorry, I've just forgotten which university it is, but major university in the US. And so she's obviously very experienced. This study sort of seemed to go to, right, we're gonna find this. We can see in these researchers that they obviously have seen things happening with BEMER, but the study design has not quite captured it. So this one was looking at the therapy blanket on horses with thoracolumbar expaxial back pain. But again, only 8 horses, but treated for 3 consecutive days with other variables measured daily for 5 days. So this found a significant improvement in nociceptive pain, so pain response thresholds, and postural stability and spinal flexibility were also significantly improved, which is interesting because it's mainly focusing on, sort of the effect on the spine. And similar improvements were not present in measurements of muscle tone, ground reaction forces, or serum biomarkers. So that's getting closer. That's showing that there's improvement in the back. And I know you're so obviously so deeply involved with posture. I mean, I often see a response in horses when we come to what I sort of think as it's the big moment when there's an energy shift during the sort of the BEMER treatment, and that sometimes it's in the first session, sometimes horses they most definitely hold out because they're thinking about what's happening, and they'll do it later. And you're both nodding, I can see, because that's what we see in body work.
Yeah.
They say, I'm not sure about this, and they stand and think about it, and then you look round sort of half an hour later, and then in a paddock yawning their head off because they've let go, and they're sort of consciously thought, okay, it's all over now. So where was I going with that? I've forgotten.
Just the changes with posture and
Yes. So it can be the first or second session I see it. There's that big shift, and they suddenly start looking and chewing and yawning, and they shift their feet around, and then bang, they stand square. And sometimes that's when I've not done anything, particularly in the first session. It can be right at the beginning. And you just go, oh, wow. And that can happen in injured horses. It's happened in one horse where he got a big leg injury, the classic hind leg front of cannon bone, hit a fence and scraped it, ripped skin in the upper layer off. And was in a lot of pain. So we were focused on that. But the horse suddenly stood square because he did something in his spine, which was not what we were thinking of. But you've got that whole horse effect that happens. And sort of arguably, then you can say that helps the effect in the legs as well, because you've got circulation happening throughout the whole body and not just in that local area. It's so important. So yeah, so that was interesting.
It's very interesting. The spinal coordination for, even just the comfort of loading, how you load your limbs is sometimes a direct reflection of the comfort that you have through, for horses, through their spine, through their neck, through their pelvis and their sacrum. So when you have comfort through all of those spaces, there's no reason to adjust your loading pattern at a ground level because you can distribute your weight evenly and it doesn't feel as though you need to compensate. Because as you said, when you had that deep awareness of, oh, my back feels fantastic. And now, despite the fact that even if there is still a bit of a structural change, functionally, I can load and I'm very aware of my contact to the ground, which is something that I have largely learned from Raquel and that we try to talk about a lot. The fact that being in your own body is such a great place to be. So, and just for anybody who's wondering, the nociceptors that you were talking about in that study, nociceptors are pain receptors. So when you have a reduction in the firing of those pain receptors, you've actually worked on comfort. And so pain reduction means that when you've found comfort, then you're more likely to move better. When you move better, you actually reinforce the reduction of pain. So because of your mechanoreceptors and other receptors in the body are being stimulated, which further inhibits your pain pathways. And then if you can keep that going, you have just a self-reinforcing effect. So even by the sounds of those few days of treatment through that last study that you were just talking about, you said that was done over 7 days. Was that how many days did you say?
5 days, just
5 days, to have all of those values changing for a positive effect, the range of motion, the spinal motion and coordination, they're such big wins.
Yeah, and we know as well, we do work on the horses, but loads of it happens afterwards. It's not just during the session. And that's another lens that we look through as sort of therapists that may not always be there in the scientific studies, because veterinary medicine is very different. And a lot of these are they're coming from veterinary schools. But we understand how, the horse goes out into the paddock and becomes its own physio. It starts moving differently, then something else improves. And there's that flow-on effect sort of through the body that is beneficial and harmonizing. So we're talking about achieving homeostasis or moving towards that, where everything is working more in conjunction and in balance.
We've talked about the cell, but there's so much other tissue that's benefiting as well, right? Including your fascia. And when your fascia is well, your comfort levels go through the roof. So that's a good. What else do you, if you're going out and you're using the BEMER, seeing people, I know you're using it on yourself as well, but what kind of experiences or what cases stand out for you that you could share with people?
I've written a few down so I don't forget them, and I've probably lost my list, of course. There are so many. I've mentioned the horse with the circulation change, and I've mentioned the vasodilation. I mean, I had one client who's water BEMER, and this is an interesting one because it does come back to vets again and some feedback from a vet, where the horse had eye surgery and had enucleation, and she was using the BEMER before he went in. It was just like, a day visit. And then, or when he came home as well. And the vet lived locally and visited after 3 days to just do a checkup. And he doesn't know about the BEMER at all. So he took the bandage off. And this is a paint horse, but it's sort of a Vero, so he's white skinned. He's got a lot of pink skin. Sorry, white face, pink skin. And so all the skin in that area was obviously pink. And he sort of took the bandage off and he said, "Oh, there's no bruising." And it's like, "Oh, okay." He said, "Normally there's a lot more bruising because it's actually quite a physical, you might know Raquel, I've never seen it, but according to him, it's quite a physical job getting an eye out of the socket, and sort of won't go into that. But the horse's recovery was just so much faster. And, that I can, again, come back to my own experiences with, say, a sprained ankle. And in a situation, I won't go into, a very big chomping horse bite on my arm from both sides. So are you still getting me? My internet connection's wobbling a bit. That should have had severe bruising, but the bruising moves incredibly fast. And you don't have anything to show off on Facebook, because it's sort of like, oh, it doesn't look like anything now because the blood is moving. And that's where you can actually see it. So toxicity is interesting. I had a horse who had been in the veterinary clinic for about 5 days on a drip and antibiotics, following some toxicity. No, sorry, take the antibiotics out of that, but on a drip following a toxic episode. And we don't know what it was and never did know, but he got better. He came home and he was cleared by the vet. He just wasn't himself. And I'd been sort of working on him for quite a while in body work anyway. I went to see him with the BEMER. And he could not handle 5 minutes on the lowest setting. So I had to take it off. He just started shifting around and got really upset. And, I could tell this horse was not himself. So I thought, okay, well, we leave it there for today. Got another horse to see. We just sort of put that one down we'll see what happens. And within a week, the owner said, "Oh, I've seen him roll again. It's the first time."
I had that experience too. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
I saw him again. He was my old friend again. He was back to normal and he was happy. And he had 15 minutes and loved it. He was giving all the full responses. And I was just kind of, my goodness. When the body really needs it, it can take a tiny, tiny signal.
Yeah. It's just like enough stimulation for the body to be like, Yeah, I can find a way to kind of heal through this instead of being stuck in whatever the
Yeah.
friction or pain kind of place.
Yeah, or again, just literally reduce circulation because there's been
Yeah.
so much happening in there. I mean, who knows? We just don't know. Um, there was another pony. This was a lovely one. We put so let's I've worked on him a lot as well. He's had severe asymmetry in his body as well, from a very bad high-low, front hooves imbalance. And we sort of said, let's do the BEMER on him at the beginning, and then we'll do the body work. And he just went off. He checked out of the hotel completely, and there was massive gut rumbles. And so we didn't do a long session, but he just stayed where he was. He wasn't coming back. He seemed quite happy. There was nothing to be concerned about. So we took the BEMER off. And eventually the owner said, well, tell you what, let's leave the body work for today. So I really like what's happening here. You can go. I will stay here with him. So I did. And she got back to me later. She said, I was there for 45 minutes. And he was absolutely fine. He was kind of like, brushed himself off and walked away at the end when he was done. He just did it in his own time. So again, you've just gone in, but the gut processing sounds, the peristalsis, it wasn't just the usual gut rumbles you might get with parasympathetic activation. It was a lot. So I don't know what was happening there. But again, we don't know. But he sorted himself out.
Yeah, like big change in circulation potentially to his
Yeah.
gut.
Yeah. That's my feeling. That's my
Mm.
feeling. It needs that blood supply to be
Yeah, and then
optimized
when
as
like
well.
under dissection, when we see like the mesentery and stuff of the gut, like there's so many tiny, teeny little blood vessels that are supplying the organs and coming through that mesentery. So if there's dehydration and tension through those connections, like it has a massive influence on gut function, and we kind of don't think about it like that a lot.
Yeah, and this is where I always think we take circulation for granted. Just think it happens, it's okay. We talk about restricted circulation. It's obviously not stopped, otherwise we'd have dead tissue everywhere, and necrosis, but it can be limited. And it made sense to me with sort of just reading, and I only read that sort of this week about the precapillary sphincters opening and
Mm.
closing at different speeds and in different areas. So
Yeah, that's so
that
interesting.
level is a bit like playing a piano and it getting faster or slower. But it's probably nothing like a piano. But again, stress is so interesting. And one of the studies which gets held as an example of showing no effect, I'll just nip back into that one because it's interesting, was the post-exercise recovery one. One of the things they did find after 2 weeks of treatment, the BEMER treated horses had a lower ratio between low frequency and high frequency in the heart rate variability,
Yeah.
which indicates less extreme differences between parasympathetic and sympathetic activation. So just the balance that's happening all the time. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
because please do. So I had this pony who was extremely stressed having moved home, and we know that nobody can explain to them what's happening, and they can be really, really upset about this sudden change in their lives. She was just like, fraught. You could tell she was jumping at everything, and sort of in extremely high vigilant state, sort of looking around. We put the BEMER on her, switched it on, and literally within 10 to 15 seconds, her head dropped and her nose was
I'm
on the stone
exhausted.
floor. Yeah, her system was
But we have
crying
this.
out for,
Yeah.
that needle went ding right the other way. And that was beautiful. And it's just so grateful to be able to do that, for her. And in another form of stress, like separation anxiety, I've used it on horses and we've got ALEC in Tamworth with the international events and the local eventing. Sorry, it's the Australian Equine Livestock Event Centre. Equestrian and Livestock Event Centre. And I had a horse there, a client horse, who got warm blood in a thoroughbred, and the off-the-track thoroughbred was getting extremely stressed when the other horse went off to do their events, their phases and classes. We put the BEMER on, and he just calmed down completely and was able to wait there without using up all his own energy, stressing. He was able to
Mm.
just handle that and be there without getting worried. And the owner said that's, it's the first time I've enjoyed a weekend in a year. This is this young rider's mother who always had to stay behind and look after this horse. So it was very interesting to see that different response. And both horses, they had BEMER as warm up as well. So we sort of do it about an hour before, no later than an hour before their classes in the morning. And they just went out calmly. They still had plenty of energy for their event and for their dressage test or their cross-country round, but there was no stressy energy. So,
Yeah.
they were just focused. And that's really interesting because you think, well, how can it work for warm up and sort of recovery as well? But it does, because it's just optimizing. It's
Yeah.
not forcing
That
anything in.
circulation's important
It's
in
not
all
invasive.
situations. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also
So,
comes back to the link between posture and behavior. Oh, well, comfort of the body and behavior. If you've got horses walking out with no stress or no tension, and they're able to stand there and relax alone, horses feel their emotions deeply in their body, and the instant that you're most sensitive, you hold a tension pattern, then it reinforces tension in your body, and then you feel it in your mind. And then on the other point you said, them just walking in, there's no extra tension, they're just going in happily to work so comfortably. The effect that it has on your mind when your expectation is that things are going to feel good in your body when you get to move it's completely different. I mean, I've experienced it myself. I know that the horses here just at home, like when I get to be slow and watch how comfortable they are as we go out to do something, they're just completely different in even the smallest of ways.
I love hearing your insights, and you're framing it differently. And I've got to stress again that this is all my personal experience. BEMER only say it helps vasomotion and the microcirculation. So all of this is my version as a practitioner. So,
Yeah, but then
but I think
how
we're
that
right.
but then how
Doing
that
this.
presents externally is going to be different for every individual, because
Yeah.
like our like the horse's circulation for each individual is going to be different depending on whether there is restrictions in a certain area, whether it's a fascial problem, whether it's you know, a bony restriction, whether it's positional, whether it's been there forever or not. Like each individual horse's microcirculation is different depending on what's brought their body to that position it is today. So they're going to have a different experience when that's
Mm.
altered. Um, yeah, like Henry, he was really interesting because he's very stiff, a lot of problems in his body. And I put on him, I think, a few days in a row, and then, just occasionally, and he was rolling over, like completely over. I hadn't seen him do that for ages, and I didn't treat him with anything else, just the BEMER. Um, and he was like cheeky, like he his naughtiness came back where he was very like he was getting playful, and he hasn't kind of been that playful for a while. So like that was interesting. And Mooney, my horse with the heat the other day, like he was so just depressed from the heat, it knocks him massively. And then putting the BEMER on him yesterday morning, he was like chasing me around this morning when I was doing groundwork with Jelly, like trotting after us, and he was, really um calm but like present. And like I
Mm.
think his nervous system is often stressed because he wind sucks all the time. And
Ah,
I noticed him going off with the young horse, and he initiated the scratching and little things that like usually she'd have to force him to stop and scratch her. So like yeah, it's really
mm.
it's so interesting how it depends on the individual and what's going on in their body. I just want to say one thing before I forget, because when you talked about like the changes in the back pain and your spine, and other horses' spine. Like we see how many horses are posturally deficient through their back, and when we think about the multifidi, majority of horses have poor quality multifidi, like the small muscles that are supporting the back
Mhm.
vertebrae. And when we think about the effect that that's going to have on like spinal microcirculation, and over time those muscles have become very like, oh, what's the word, like tight, or like their activations change, their contractions change, their circulations change, their neural functions changed, to the point that they just gradually get less and less effective in their proper function. And so then we think about like starting to improve the circulation coming back into those small muscles, and the potential effects that that's going to have on the horse then being able to use those muscles, because you're kind of waking them up by increasing that microcirculation, and then you're giving them a better chance to be able to actually respond. And if they've been chronically depleted, and not being able to activate in any postural situation, like it takes a lot sometimes to wake those muscles up, like especially when you've only got like your activations or your body work. It can still take a fair bit of postural work to wake them up. So if we can wake them up in another way by actually increasing the circulation, which like you said, Jane, can also influence nerve function to the area, like it's just another way that we can really help. Then when we start doing postural exercises, we have better chance of those muscles actually coming into action.
If they're
Mm.
being nourished, if your circulation delivers all of your amino acids, everything that you need to actually build the muscle volume and its ability to function, and also take away all of the waste once it's been working as well.
And they're so deep, and they just get chronically deprived over time of having poor posture. Or like in your situation, Jane, with the scoliosis, like you imagine your multifidi, would have been struggling because they're constantly trying to
Mm.
compensate for that, and then you would have had significantly reduced circulation, like everything that goes on with your spine not being in alignment. And then as it's come back, like that improved circulation means that your muscles can actually start to support your spine in a different way.
And happy muscles again.
Yeah.
And a lack of sort of noxious efferent information going into the
Yeah, well,
nervous
that change
system
in
as
those
well.
nociceptors. Yeah. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
was talking about before with the change in the patterning of pain.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, when you're talking just then, and, I love the way you say it, which is so considered. I just kind of coming out with all my impressions that are just flooding out. But to me, it's sort of like all of those muscles and well, everything. It's like it's great symphony orchestra, and it's gone completely out of tune. And how do you get it back? You can sort of have benefits in one area and not in another. And it's just this ongoing confusion or partial improvement overall. And I sort of feel that this product is helping to get everything working again at the same time and reminding the nervous
Like you've given the
system of what
conductor
normal is, where
drink
normal
of
is.
water. Yeah.
Some
The
horses, and I
conductor
think
becomes the conductor comes back online, and then that helps
Get
like
your harmony. You need your
straighter.
harmony back.
Yeah.
terrible with my metaphors. It can all go, it goes
I
badly
love
wrong at
orchestras.
times,
It
but
does. Yeah.
but yeah,
Uh,
it's fine. It's getting fine. Where is normal? Where is true north? And it's getting the body heading back in that direction when it's become very confused and sometimes over a long period of time. So, we can talk about compensations, but it's the communication systems are down as well, and it's
yeah.
just getting that happening again. And yeah, I think very often that's what I'm seeing. And yeah, I could go on and on, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, cool. Do you have any other big cases that you want to share, or any other big kind of takeaways that you want to?
Um, there's always more, but we've got the lady who just shared on the group who's just bought a BEMER on my Facebook group for Australian BEMER users to sort of share experiences, mainly me at the moment, but I don't mind. It's all very interesting. But she's had a horse who'd been like chronic pain of some description, unknown history for about 5 years, was dragging her toes. And she'd had, I think she'd had chiropractor at some point, but it hadn't gone too well. And this is a very fearful, nervous mare going onwards. She bought a BEMER, and we talked about it a lot beforehand. And she said, I'm hoping that in 4 weeks or so, or a couple of weeks, and get some major improvements. And I was kind of like, well, it's the let's just see. You sort of never want to say you will get major improvements because we don't know. We don't know what's wrong. Not everything can be repaired or replaced or returned to normal. She got major improvements after 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And sort of after a couple of weeks, which was the original target now, she's got a mare. She said the mare was very, very sort of tired and processing for sort of like 4 days. Actually coming up to her in the paddock now. Didn't do that before. She can trim the hooves in one single session rather than over several days. She stopped dragging her toes. She's got a recent restriction in her shoulder following, I think it was a slip into the creek. That just disappeared. So obviously not something, terrible, but, let's not, let's enjoy that one as well. And also her husband feels okay about going up to the horse now. It's probably the biggest
That's a big one.
biggest measure of improvement going. Not that she was, aggressive or anything, but just reactive. She's very reactive.
Unpredictable.
Yeah, and stuck in that overactivated state due to pain. And she's actually posted, the photo of the horse with big sweat patches on the hindquarters after BEMER, which is where, to me, that's ischemia, is where the blood flow is coming back. And, you have the heat effect, localized heat effect. I've seen that in lots of different areas for around muscle damage, horse with a suspected rib, that would happen there as well. Yeah, and the horses often turn around and look at these spots. An awful lot of them turn around and look at the girth area, I
Yeah.
find. Yeah.
Yeah. Ellie, the first time, she was quite like she had a lot going on in her body and she found it quite weird because there was obviously she was feeling a lot of sensations, whereas as you say, as things kind of get better, they don't feel much. But she was kind of always like, oh, what is that? What is that?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's weird. And today I put on her legs for the first time and she was like, oh, like that feels strange. Like, whereas when you put it on and like everything is pretty good, you don't really feel anything. But yeah, she had a lot of diaphragm stuff and there was feelings that she had in her body with that. Whereas now I put it on and she just enjoys the process,
Yeah, which is beautiful. Mm.
Yeah. So just before we probably had enough time, but you're using it as part of your bodywork session. So, whenever you just go and treat the horse as a
Yeah, I tend to use it in the second session. Like first session, I just want to get to know what's going on myself and get your baseline, as it were, find out what's happening. And then with regular clients, I use it where we've got that chance to sort of keep things moving along. And it certainly, oh God, I mean, the difference in effect of the things I need to do when I'm using BEMER as well. I have to do so much less.
Yeah.
I feel that what I do has a much more profound effect. So it works really well in that way. And I don't keep everything the same every time, but the regulars, they just kind of expect it now and they seem to
They're like,
about me and
excuse me.
but one of them leans down and touches the bag.
Yeah.
She recognizes it.
Yeah. Then you're like, geez, I hope I didn't forget to charge it. No, it has a really long battery life, which is really helpful. And then people who have it, because people who have it themselves, they're using it anything from like, once or twice a day to like a few times a week, or what do you find with people who kind of own it?
Varies. Just varies. Some people use it mainly for exercise, warm up and cool down. So
Yeah.
people are competing. Other people, so are using it every day, or people with a lot of horses moving it around, doing different horses at different times, depending on needs. So it just varies.
Yeah.
I think the thing is always just watch the horse and see how happy they are about it.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely found it a valuable modality because when I'm, you're time limited or I've just been too tired, to be honest, to treat my horses with my artery thing. But, I've been able to just put it on while they're eating. And then So one or two horses might get in the morning and one or two might get in the evening, and like that, it's super easy to apply in that situation. Like as a horse owner, I can just go, all right, well, they've had their session while they're eating their breakfast, or their dinner, and yeah, so it makes it really easy to
Yeah.
apply. And you know that you've been effective in 5 to 15 minutes. Like it's,
Mm.
for me to just do body work on all of the horses, I'd have to allow more time in those days than just sticking the BEMER on for 5 minutes. So like they're getting something more regularly than they would usually.
Time budget friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really time budget friendly. Feel like they're getting a lot of bang for their buck. So I look forward to kind of using it more with my
Mm.
clients, because I've been treating for a long time without it. So it'll be really interesting to see the differences that I notice incorporating it into my treatments. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, there was a
These
human
horses so
study. I
well.
just finish off on it.
Yeah,
A human study that showed it was osteopathy, BEMER, and osteopathy and BEMER, and the ones that did best had both,
yeah, that's
which is
cool.
interesting. But that's humans, of course, who can report pain levels. So
Yeah, yeah, no, it's exciting.
interesting stuff.
Awesome. Okay, did you have anything you want to finish off with there, Jane?
No, I've talked myself out for the now, I think. I just hope it made sense.
No, it was great. People can find out more information on the BEMER Facebook group, BEMER Horse Users Australia.
Australia, yeah.
And also Jane has lots of amazing articles, not necessarily related to BEMER, but just related to lots of awesome stuff on thehorsesback.com. So I highly recommend people to go and look at that. And perhaps we'll have Jane back another time to talk about your foals.
Thank you.
It's really
Yeah,
interesting.
I do have a good section on BEMER on my website as well.
Awesome.
It just goes through all the technical specifications and videos of vets talking about it, that kind of thing. So just background information for anyone who wants to read about that, as well as a blog post, which kind of covers the sort of things I've been talking about today.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
So,
thank
do you
you.
have some takeaways that you want to share?
I think my takeaway is just that I think you said it differently here, but you have shared before that you don't need a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The fact that this is a low frequency, small therapy, it's like Rico was saying, a conductor who's just making small adjustments to the orchestra to bring it back to harmony, and that a refined signal to a complex and sensitive organism can be very significant to their nervous system and their whole body.
Yeah, and I mean
So
the
clear.
importance of that microcirculation, for health and how big it affects that it can have, and that it's about the vasomotion, the actual smooth muscle contraction of the arterioles. Like it's not just about vasodilation, it's actually about contraction of those arterioles and how that's improving circulation and nutrient supply and metabolic waste removal from cells. So that we recognize that that's been kind of investigated with this specific therapy. It's not hearsay as such.
Yeah, and it's really brought home to me again, just getting ready for today, just making sure I had all my ducks lined up in a row. Just have, blood is the essence of life. And, this isn't a side benefit. This is a core benefit to the horse that we're talking about here.
Yeah,
So
in so many,
all these different
many
levels.
ways, like even in the organs, which we talked about. So that's important to remember. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jane, for joining us. It's been a very informative discussion. And obviously, if anyone wanted to purchase a BEMER, Jane is your go-to woman. So that's where I got mine from. So yeah, thank you for
In
joining.
Australia, yeah.
In Australia, yes, of course. Thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, and Sophie Vanderberg in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so we can share more valuable insights. And reach out with any listener requests for topics that you'd like to hear us talk about.
See you in the next exciting episode.